when you give up an addiction or something that you're doing too regularly, the little monster inside of you that's controlling that is slowly dying, and there's an energy created in your resistance that can flow over into your life. Because I think it's a very valuable practice to give up certain things which aren't contributing to your mental and physical well-being.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years' experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, and Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, and the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention that there is a DIY course. So this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regimen. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10. That's CW and the number 10. So again, that's hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10. Thank you for your support.
Hi there, from sunny England. Welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior with your host, Lawrence Neal. I don't get to say that very often, so I thought I would start off by telling you how sunny the UK is today. This podcast is my journal and quest to understand how to optimize productivity in health, career, business, and lifestyle. My guests include health and fitness giants like Rob Wolf, underground, rarely interviewed exercise experts like Tim Ryan, HIIT specialists like Ted Harrison, Skylar Tanner, and Dr. Doug McGuff, athletes, New York Times bestselling authors, highly successful business owners, startup founders, life hackers, finance experts, and so on. After several requests, my next guest is the Fiat driving, cigar chomping, high intensity training trainer and owner of Vital Exercise, Ted Harrison, who joins me for round two. Ted Harrison has been involved in the business of strength and conditioning for over 30 years. He is a very knowledgeable and open-minded trainer and is always experimenting with different approaches to exercise. In this interview, we cover how Ted's approach to training his clients has evolved, his thoughts on the sometimes destructive nature of the social media debate on health and fitness, his time and experience training with bodybuilder Vince Gironda. We recap on Ted's approach to building muscle mass and how that's evolved over time. And this is Ted's hypertrophy session that he incorporates alongside a routine very similar to the Body by Science Big Five, which in his opinion is more effective for building more muscle mass for most of the population. We also talk about how to effectively perform crunches and other effective exercises to train the abdominal muscles. And then we finish up on some of Ted's thoughts on diet in general for burning fat and building muscle, his current diet, how that's changed as we last spoke, meditation, and much, much more. For all of the show notes for this episode and all episodes, please go to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/podcast. So without further ado, please enjoy round two with Ted Harrison. So Ted, welcome to the show again. Thanks for coming on for round two. Excited to catch up with you since we last spoke, which on the podcast was 2 years ago probably, but we've obviously hung out since then. but that was still like over a year ago. So lots to catch up on. I guess before I dig into questions, can you just do me a favour and provide the listeners with a quick summary of your background, for those that haven't heard the first round with you?
Well, thanks for having me on, first of all, a second time. It's great to be here. I started personal training, opened a gym in 1983 when I was, I think I was 21, 22 years old. You forget, because I'm coming up to 56 this year. So I've had two Nautilus gyms back in the early 80s, and then in and out of training people for many years. I trained people from, proper gym locations, and then in very well equipped garages and all sorts of things like that. And then about 5 years ago, I retired from a business I was involved in with my family, and moved away from the town, Clacton-on-Sea, and moved to Manningtree, which is about half an hour away. And after a little while of doing nothing and running out of money very fast, I opened a small personal training studio just up the road from where I live, called Vital Exercise, and I've been in business there now for just over 4 years.
And you've got a bit of a background in. Do you just want to go through your background quickly in terms of your weight training and how you got involved in high intensity training? Just a quick summary on that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, the business side of it is, of course, preceded by my own love of training and my own interest in it. I started working out at a very young age after being very interested in Bruce Lee, and of course he was very interested in his training, so I got into training, and then I saw my first muscle magazine with Mike Mentzer on the cover and bought that. And one thing led to the other, and I started training in earnest, and I had my own little gym, and just kept going. And then it developed over the years, obviously getting into the business side of it. And then I done a little bit, a moderate amount of competing in a couple of contests, and it just became a very, very important part of my life, so that life is not life for Ted Harrison without training, and that is it reaches almost down to a spiritual level, really. I mean, it's just you can't exist without doing your workouts and being involved and around it. So of course your attitude's changed to it somewhat over the years, but it matures. It's like fine wine, to use an overused analogy, but yeah. So I'm hanging in there. I'm still training, and I'm keeping at it.
Well, you look great.
Thanks, man. even the hair, even with no hair, it's still fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I've had to embrace that unfortunate event as well. I saw a picture of you actually with hair on Facebook. One of your, I think probably, I'm going to guess, is when you were holding up my daughter. Your daughter, that's right. Yeah. So that was quite weird to see his hair. I was like, wow, because I was like, I want to find a picture of Ted when he was like 20 or 30, but
with his barnet. I know. Can you believe it?
Yeah, no, it's. I think you look great now. Just. I'm
the only one. I appreciate that. I'm the only one in my family throughout eons and eons that's had a baldness problem. It's not a problem. I shouldn't say that. To the bald community, it's not a problem.
Did you ever used to be quite insecure about it then?
No, never.
Never.
No, it just saves on shower time, right?
Oh, totally. It's a low maintenance haircut for sure.
And another huge area to apply aftershave, so you smell great.
Cool. So thanks for just giving a summary of of background in business and training. I just wanted to ask you, if you're comfortable, sort of elaborate on this. I remember you saying when we were I think you told me this when we were hanging out once, that when you were involved in high intensity training exercise when you were younger and sort of dabbling in that business, your family, who were running a separate business, kind of didn't really take you very seriously. Could you just elaborate on why, I guess, where your head was at during that phase, and how you kind of coped with that, that kind of response you got from friends and family around that time?
I think really my head was in my heart, really, because that's where, if you can put it that way, that's the way I wanted to go with my life, So I pursued that. I didn't get a tremendous amount of support from my family, because the family business was a thing where you were supposed to be in it, and of course my father expected me to support him and be in the business, which I tried to do while I was running the gyms as well, and I was back and forward and still maintaining an involvement. But what you got to do, what I did was I just sort of got the support where I could find it, from my friends that did support me, and of course the clients that came to train. So I can't say it was it was a little bit hurtful initially, but everyone's got their reasons. Everybody has a way of looking at things. My father expected me to be a certain kind of person. I wasn't necessarily that kind of person, but that's life, isn't it? I've got no problems with it. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and you have to get your head down and get on with that. Otherwise, you're just a plastic person, aren't you, being moulded by somebody else? And that's one of the great things for me now, having moved away from that environment, is that I've created my own, thanks to doing things like with yourself on this and with other podcasts with Bob Whalen and what have you. I could create my own world that I can inhabit, and I'm very, very pleased with that.
Good. So, what have you been up to since we last spoke? What is it? Main focus on sort of growing or maintaining vital exercise and working with clients? So, just give us a summary of what you've been up to since you last came on the podcast.
The gym continues to grow in its client base, and I'm sort of in a constant process of evolving myself and my own training and the training of my clients. I'd like to run the business just by sets, reps, and numbers, and a basic format of exercise. What I've evolved to do over the last couple of 3 years is to bring people in, and once the basics and the basic principles of good form and progression and suitable exercise selection for the individual have been gotten down, I like to sort of to try and enable the client over a course of a number of workouts to have more input into their own training, so that they can become something of the workout themselves, because I'm trying to develop in them a love for training, not just improve their health and strength and what have you. Because I think if you can install a love of training, then all the other benefits from training can come, in the wake of that. It's the difference between, you can go, for fishing as an analogy, you can go fishing every day to catch fish for food, or you can go fishing every day because you love to fish. You catch the food anyway, but you enjoy the process of fishing. So what I'm trying to achieve with my clients is the love of training for its own sake, for that session, rather than I'm going in to, prevent sarcopenia, or I'm going in to increase my muscle strength or my, stroke volume of my heart. That is all fantastic, and of course it's vitally important to the process, but I'm trying to develop in them, first of all, a love of training so it becomes a part of them, and also an autonomy within that workout so that they can direct it. I struggle for an analogy for this, but because what I'm going to say now is a little bit weak in terms of its analogy, but what I'm trying to become and what I'm striving to become for my clients is kind of like a caddy, like a workout caddy. Yeah?
Got it.
Now, that isn't. I could do with a better analogy than that, but that really is as close as I can get. So that they come in, we have a conversation, how they're feeling on that particular day. We begin the workout, and I like them to ask me questions. I don't want to sit down with them after 6 months of a year and say, okay, you've got A, B, C, D, and E to do. Some people do like that, even the more experienced ones. But what I want them to do is say, what do you want to do today? You know, they understand the principles of a good workout. They know what formulates that, and they can work within those parameters. But I need them to give me some feedback, and I'll say, well, that's a good idea, and leave the weights to me, and I'll adjust the stacks as we go through this workout. If we're doing multiple sets of one thing, and I suggest you don't do that today, or if they're feeling particularly under the weather, mentally, then I'll warm them up slower, and I'll try and walk them through that process so that they take control. And I'm just providing input, like handing them a club, because I think that's how they should get onto the fairway. Yeah?
Yeah, I get you. So would you say that's something you've been using, that kind of approach more in the last couple of years, or has that always been your kind of method? Because it does sound similar to when we last spoke on the podcast. So would you say or is that not correct? Is that something you've only really embraced?
No, I think I come from that place of I'm very open. I'm very open in terms of workout structures, ideas, and philosophies. I don't get bogged down in dogma. So I guess that if you've got that open mind, when it inevitably leads to, all roads lead to one place, and that one place for me is that open philosophy. And I guess it just has developed and refined itself over working one-to-one in that very tight, confined environment of my gym. You've been there. It's not a big place. And working, thousands of workouts with people, it's like an energy you pick up, and it's an exchange of energy, and you just start to develop, your unique approach.
How do you get people to really enjoy the workout, like you were just describing there? How do you actually get, in practical terms, how do you actually get someone to really enjoy it?
It takes time. It's about bringing them in and having them they don't necessarily enjoy it right from the start, or they may enjoy it from the start and then fall off. I think it's a matter of encouraging the person, tailoring the workout to the unique individual, and keeping the process and being very attuned to their own personality and their own goals and needs, and trying to work along with that so that they get a sense of satisfaction, from each and every workout. Trying to explain to them that they're not always going to want to train. They're not going to want to turn up and leave their couch to come to my gym and be, punching the air with enthusiasm, and trying to rid them of that unnecessary crutch of motivation and let them turn up and do the work appropriate for that particular day. And just gradually over time, as they start to see results and they see the weights increasing and their functional ability and enjoyment of life hopefully increasing, it becomes reciprocal, and they begin to fall in love with this process, fall in love with this activity.
No, that's a good answer. I think it's interesting what you were saying, I think, before we started recording, about the kind of spiritual Zen quality of training. And it's something I'm really kind of coming to appreciate, the feeling you get when you do, because these workouts often do require discipline to practice regularly, and they're very uncomfortable, and it's a great feeling when you can give it everything for a whole workout, which is something I've definitely, having switched to a bodyweight program, which I'm doing at the moment, is something I've struggled to do. And I've only recently realized, actually, if I do just do that thing I really don't want to do, I'm actually going to feel great afterwards, because I never used to have that issue, because I was so excited to do it, if that makes sense. when I did like the big 5. But at the start of my sort of high intensity training journey, but that does over a course of years, especially when you start seeing obviously marginal gains, if any, from a strength and muscle gain point of view. It does take a different mindset to cultivate the discipline to continue doing it. So I'll just be really interested in hearing what your thoughts are about the sort of, for want of better words, like the sort of spiritual Zen relationship you've got with training, and what's motivated you to continue training for such a long period of time, and obviously as a result, stay in great condition.
I think first and foremost, it's not necessary to glue yourself to any one routine. I think as you evolve as a person over time, not only do your requirements and your goals change, but also your personality and your particular drives. So to say that you have to stick because it's scientifically valid to one particular routine, after a certain amount of time, that will start to drag you down a little bit mentally and spiritually, and it will stop you evolving into this process. So you have to be able to be willing to switch and change back and forward between different techniques and mix workout philosophies together, which will develop your own unique style of training. And that's very much what I've done with myself over the course of my very long training career, and training for competition, and moving to California and training in the gyms out there, training with Vince Gironda, and training in various different locations around, and doing all these things has allowed me now at my age to have a way of training which suits me. I don't need it. I do log my workouts, but I don't need it on paper. I don't have to write that workout down and go in. On the drive to the gym, I'll train 2 or 3 days a week. One day I'm driving to the gym. What am I going to do today? Well, what did I do last time? And I'll base it on that. I don't want to repeat, Or I'll take a mini workout while I'm between clients. If I've got 45 minutes to an hour, I'll work out, okay, how am I going to fit this in? Pull all the information from the last couple of workouts and design something there on the spot. It's more about it. This kind of word sets the high intensity community alight, but it's more about a feel, than it is about an objective viewpoint, an objective dogma. But of course, that's after years of training. You do need basics. Early on, you do need the structure. But I think eventually it's a wonderful place to be able to come at training very subjectively.
So I've got a few questions here around, personal training, high-intensity training. Some of those were submitted. You mentioned there you used to train with Vince Gironda. I didn't know that. To be fair, I didn't know much about who he was until about 2 hours ago. But tell me about that experience. What was that like? What was he? I saw his physique's very impressive. So how was that experience?
It was terrific. It was in the 80s. I used to go over to America to spend about 6 to 8 weeks at a time over there in the winter. Our winter. It's never really winter out there. I used to just stay in a little apartment and train in World's Gym and Gold's Gym, just sucking up the atmosphere and working out. And Vince Gironda used to offer a 3 workout course, and you could train. He would train you, who would essentially be your personal trainer for the day, which is kind of like saying, having one of the gods of training to direct your training. And I just caught the bus over from Los Angeles to his gym at near Hollywood, a place called Ventura Boulevard, and turned up there early in the morning, and he trained me for 3 days, just for an hour or two, which was a priceless experience for me that affected my training for the rest of my life, And it was great, I learned from him. and you can't get better than him. And there are some wonderful books out there now. Vince's Secret Locker and all his old bulletins. Vince's bulletins are available. There's lots of stuff available online. But to have the experience of being trained by him was an amazing thing. You know, you talk about spirituality. That's kind of like working out with one of the gurus, you know, in India. You know, it's training or getting spiritual advice from them. With Vince, you know, pushing you around and shoving your head and you know, and shouting at you and or saying, "I'm very pleased with that. I'm not happy with that." You know, it was terrific. Yeah.
Did he have, what was his type of approach to training? Was it more high sort of traditional bodybuilder, high volume routines, or?
No, not really. He'd gone through his own evolution with training, and he was, you know, he'd gone from. One of his philosophies was always and this is of course where I get my volume and brevity ideas from. It's all from him. I mean, his idea was to do a lot of sets. Say, for example, 6 sets of 6 reps or 8 sets of 8 reps with a very short interval of rest in between, and get the workout over with very quickly. In comparison to myself, he trained more days per week than I recommend, but that's just, you know, another difference. But his evolution had reached a point when I was training with him that what he was advising was 4 exercises per body part. He called it 4 sides to a muscle. So you would do, for instance, for your chest, you would do a neck press with a barbell, and then a kind of slight incline dumbbell fly, parallel dips on a V bar, so your arms are quite wide, and maybe finish up with a pullover or no, maybe a cable crossover or something like that. So you would do 1 set of each, literally going 1, 2, 3, 4, no rest, straight through, and then you would move on to another body part. And that's how he trained me. You know, I think we did I've still got the workout cards written by him. I think it was legs and abdominals one day, then it was chest and back another day, and then it was shoulders and arms and forearms for the 3rd day. And I think then you maybe take a day off and repeat.
So it was. It sounds like the workouts were quite short in duration, though. Like, it sounds like you'd be done within half hour. Yeah. 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 Okay.
Vince was a little bit anti-machine. You know, he wasn't big into the Nautilus, but there was a lot of Nautilus principles in his. Nautilus principles, Arthur Jones's ideas and Vince's ideas kind of intersected at some points with the brevity and you know, the low set approach. So yeah.
Because you mentioned you were, when you were young, you were quite skinny, you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So during this time, were you still that guy, or had you gained a lot of muscle after working with Vince, or prior or afterward? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I forget what weight it was when I started, but I was a beanpole, you know, and I eventually, largely through doing Mike Mentzer's approach and working on, you know, kind of the Arthur Jones thing with Nautilus. Of course, I had a Nautilus gym. So, yeah, I guess I was weighing something like maybe 160 pounds, something like that. And in my 20s. And then just kept, basically my weight gain has been very consistent up until my sort of about 35. I eventually reached about 15 stone, you know. It was big because I'm only 5'9", so I was a big lad. But I'm back down now. I weigh around 13 stone.
But was that, I mean, was that pure muscle, or did you have quite a bit more fat mass on you at that, when you were that weight?
At 15 stone, I looked like a kind of a little power lifter, you know. I didn't have visible abdominals, but I looked big, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like now you've still got that same level of muscle mass? You've just stripped a lot of the fat, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
My physique now at 56 coming up is in my 50s. My physique has never been better. I'm not saying that in any kind of, you know, bragging way, but for me personally, it's never been better because of the approach I bring to the training. It's much better. My understanding of diet is much better. A lot of these things from Vince Gironda I learned back there, I ignored. I didn't follow everything, you know. and I still don't now, but a lot of that advice has proved itself correct. And
interesting.
So yeah, I'm in much better shape than I really physically looking in the mirror than I have been ever.
Awesome. Well, you know, according to Clarence Bass, you've got your best years to come. He said he looks his best at 60.
Yeah, that's terrific, right?
It is. It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
So, okay, come back to some questions from listeners and friends of yours. What frustrates you with regard to the theory and application of trainers and trainees that you see on social media?
Well, I mean, the whole idea of arguing over exercise and all that vitriol and really, it's pathetic. You know, I mean, I mean, you and I don't agree totally on our approaches to exercise. You know, I trained you a certain way, and it's not particularly for you, maybe because it just doesn't suit your personality, or, you know, and we can hang out and get drunk together and eat a steak and throw our arms around each other. It doesn't even, it's not, I don't care what fishing rod you use, man, you know, going back to the fishing analogy. I don't give a shit about that, right? So this should be the attitude of everyone in training, as long as the person doing the recommendation is not having you balance on one of them balls with an Olympic bar above your head and doing stupid things. You know, if it's arguing about a slow rep or a fast rep, or, you know, a full body workout, or training 4 days a week split, or whatever, this is immaterial. Okay, people are threatening lives on social media. I'm going to come round there and I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to punch you in the face over exercise. Yeah. Now, where's your mastery of yourself as a coach, as someone who's supposed to be inspiring people, if you're going to create that kind of attitudes online? You're not whole as yourself as an individual if you have to spout that crap at people, right? If you're secure in yourself and your own knowledge, you're not threatened by anybody else's knowledge or approach, yeah? So I'm very much against it, but I try not to follow it too much. I do get involved in it occasionally, but I try not to get involved in it too much, because it's too negative, and it's not what I think... because it's not just exercise, right? It's human beings you're talking about, and it offends me. It's like people who won't get over when you're driving. You know, if you're driving down a road and you've got someone coming towards you, and they won't slow down, you know, they're going to smash in your car if you don't get out of the way. I can't look at that if I see that up the road. It offends me, you know, because these people are just working on a level I'm not on, you know. So I don't like it. Grow up, I think, really, is what I'm saying. I
agree. I also think part of the problem is that when you write a message on Facebook, there's no tone and no body language, so it can be misinterpreted completely. And there's a lot of people I've noticed, or a few people, that they write something and they're actually trying to be helpful and they're trying to be kind and contribute to the conversation and not trying to be aggressive. But even I misinterpret it sometimes. So people mustn't misinterpret these things, and then it spirals out of control, which is a shame. And that's just, I guess, one of the downsides of the written word, you know, when you're trying to communicate with someone. But, you know, go on.
A thing to put on the end of most of your anyone's writings on Facebook posts is not LOL, but IMO. In my opinion, that takes away a lot of the misunderstandings of tone. Just put that, in my opinion.
Yeah, or was it IMHO? In my humble opinion. But
yeah, even better.
I mean, but the thing is, though, it's all our opinion, right? So yeah, it's almost, I get what you're saying. Like, it will put people at ease who read it. But in my opinion, you shouldn't even have to write that, because of course it's your opinion. Everything is.
Yes, yeah. So people need to understand that without reacting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think coming from a place, I think in a lot of cases, I think this applies. This is a hell of a thing to say, but really, no one knows what the hell they're doing 100%. You know, if we did, we'd all be where we wanted to be, and we're not. We understand it to a point, this exercise thing, but no one knows everything about it, right? And if you come at it from that aspect, not you, not I, not any of these people on social media or out there selling books. No one knows it all, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to sell anything anymore, right? Because everyone would be where they want to be. We'd all be lean, fit. We're getting closer, but just face the facts that this is still relatively an infancy of science, what we're doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Skylar said to me once, which is that we're all winging it. Even the greatest scientists on exercise are still winging it, because the more you learn, the more you realise you don't know, or that there is to learn.
Yes.
Which is quite intimidating and daunting, and something I've definitely, I interviewed Ryan Hall yesterday, who contributed to the genetic factor chapter in Body by Science.
Yes.
In fact, I think I made a very large contribution to that chapter, and it just made me realise, my God, there's so much I never understood or don't understand about exercise. And it's quite interesting because it's kind of connected the dots in a way for me, because he talks about how different approaches to volume with training will work better for people with different fibre types across the different muscles. And obviously very few people have uniform fibre types across their entire body, so that different muscles respond differently to different protocols. And I hadn't really explored that very much before, and that was really interesting to learn more about that. And I can see now why more volume, such as your approach, which we can talk about in a sec, will actually help certain people get better results.
Yes.
So good stuff. Okay, so I'd be interested actually in terms of like stuff that you've read recently, whether it be in social media, probably unlikely, or elsewhere online, or I guess stuff you've read. Was there anything that's had a really positive impression of you, something that you've picked up and thought, oh, that's interesting, and or perhaps implemented in your own training or training of others that's got good results? Anything that comes to mind?
It's really little nuggets of things, particularly on YouTube. And over the last couple of years, the people listening to this won't be able to see, but you can. I have developed this from watching this video on YouTube of an exercise to keep your neck mobile and pain-free, just without weights, by moving your arms in a small circles out at shoulder length, and then turning your head from side to side and up and down. And I found this on YouTube, and I do apologise to the person who put it up, because I cannot remember who it was. But I used that because I train a lot of elderly people. My eldest client is 78, and it's very difficult for some people when they're driving to turn their head, myself included, turn your head and look over your shoulder. But this exercise done before every workout and before going to bed is a terrific thing. So there's that. I'm also a big fan of that hip thruster thing. I love that hips. Yeah, when you're laying down with your upper back just below the shoulder blades on a low bench, and you're bringing your hips up and down. Uh-huh. I love that. And I've had a hip and back machine, a hammer hip and back machine, and I've got a lower back machine in my gym, and of course a Nautilus leg press, and they're all fantastic. The lower back particularly, but that little hip thrust movement is a terrific thing, particularly when you're strong enough to do it one leg at a time. Yeah, I haven't got the actual hip thrust unit. I'm considering it, but you can modify it in your gym with a bench and holding a small sandbag on you for extra resistance and what have you. I love that. That brings a very unique, and having used a lot of machines, I get to know what a good feeling is, and that little hip thrust movement is a very good thing. I love that.
Is that because I've done the exercise before, and that's more focused on the glutes and hamstrings, right? That type of exercise, yeah. Because I've done it. Yeah. I've done it literally just lying on my carpet, where you thrust your hips up in the air. I haven't done the one-legged version, but I've done where you thrust your hips up, and then you very slowly. You all the while you're contracting your glutes. And I think Chris Highcock in Hillfit, he describes you as, imagine that you're holding a penny between your bum cheeks.
That's great. Yeah.
And that was a really helpful way of, I guess, instructing how to do the workout properly, but incredibly challenging. Like, you do that and you literally just lying on the carpet, thrusting, doing a slower controlled movement where you're thrusting your hips up and then bring it back down to 4 again. I reached failure, I guess, within, I think, 2 minutes of doing that the first couple of times. So what is, I'm struggling to understand though, that's one version of it. What's the version you mean with a type of machine or
Well, you have it's like a little platform, and basically, just imagine, so your upper back, just below shoulder blades there, your mid back, I should say, is on a bench. Okay, so your head is up here. So your body's probably around 30 degrees, and you're sitting on the ground. Okay. With your knees bent and your feet in front of you, and you basically just lift your rear end up until you look like a table. So this is the position you reach. So you're going down this way and you're coming up that way. Yes, down and up. So it's like exactly what you did, except your backside has got more. Hips have got more distance to travel, so it makes it more of a full range exercise. Right. Yeah?
Okay, got it.
I mean, they do get very competitive with it. I will say that, where you see these young girls with huge weights with a pad on an Olympic bar, and they're trying to thrust up 315. I mean, I dare say you can get phenomenally strong doing it. I'm not sure that's a great idea. I think you can get great results with bands or just doing it slow and controlled, one leg at a time. I'm not sure how much weight you need. I haven't tried it with weight like that, so I don't know. But just have a look on YouTube. They have a page on Facebook, the Hip Thrust Unit, and you can just wing it in your own house and get an idea of how to do it. And you just need a small sandbag or some kind of weight you can lay on one side and just do it one leg at a time. And it's a terrific movement.
Yeah, I have to give that a crack. Good stuff. All right. So last time we spoke on the podcast, you talked about high intensity training, but then you talked about, and I said, why do you work out more? And you said, because I'm vain.
That was a popular quote.
Yeah. I think that we should have actually put that in bold, perhaps on the blog post. I do that now. Actually, I have a friend I work with. He actually takes the best soundbite and puts it at the start of the podcast. So that would have been a perfect example for that. So perhaps we'll do something like that for this one. So you were talking about how you did a big 5, big 6 type routine. 1 set to failure once a week, but then 3 or 4 days later you do a hypertrophy, or you termed it a hypertrophy sort of routine, where you would do 3 sets, say, of dips and chins and curls and stuff like that, in order to, in your opinion, build more muscle mass effectively.
Yes.
Now, I know that was a really oversimplified summary, but is that still the way you train for yourself?
It's still got some of those ingredients in it. Over the last couple of years, it's gone on again as I get sort of more and more intuitive with it, I guess you could call it that. I mean, I tend to go for longer periods of time, mixing stuff up. So how can I? The only best way to say what did I do this week? Okay, yeah, so on Monday.
Let's talk about that.
On Monday, I trained. I actually trained with a client, and we did 1 set of leg press, 2 sets of overhead press, 2 sets of pull downs, 1 set of chest press, 1 set of rows, and 1 set on the lower back. Okay. Then 2 days later, I went back in and I done some work on our punching device for a couple of rounds, and I worked my abdominals and finished up with some tricep work. Yesterday I trained again, so that's 3 times this week, and I did 2 sets on the punching device. And then I did 2 high rep sets of chest press and 2 high rep sets of pull downs. And then I did 2 sets of those hip thrust movements. So that's just how it felt at the time, and just what felt right.
And that was completely intuitive. You just felt. Did you just feel like, what, these muscles feel pretty good today? I feel like I can work them. They don't feel sore or anything. And then is that one of the ways you assess what exercises you select?
Yeah, and next week might be totally different. I'm not against beating a body part up a couple of times a week and then resting it for a bit of a week. I mean, you can get in there and you can train. My arms don't respond particularly well to more than once a week. you know. I've learnt that over the course, but my back will. So I'm not against going in and training and that's probably one of the reasons why my arms don't respond, because there's so much arm in bicep in pushing and pulling, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not against doing back 3 times in 1 week. Okay, I'll do rows 1 week, I'll do 1 day, pull downs a couple of days later, and then 3 days later I'll do some 5 sets of chins or something, and then I won't train back for a week. You know, I'll just go on to some lower back work and just avoid it. Yeah, so that's kind of mixing it up that way. So the format is still, if you look back through the tunnel of that, you'll see that the principles are there, recovery, you know. But I don't necessarily have to be glued to that recovery circle every time I train. That's going to happen down the road. But for now, I want to do this. It feels right, and I'm going to train it and beat that body part up for a while, and then leave it alone to let that happen. Give it a bit of extra, and then rest it.
One of the things Doug said to me when I interviewed him last is he the way he said it was. And he's talking about me, he said your DNA hasn't taken a dump on you yet, and it was basically saying that in terms of recovery. So when you're younger, you almost don't know when you need recovery because your body doesn't tell you, because it's so resilient, or it seems to I don't know, it seems to be able to sort of cover up that signal, whereas when you're older you really can tell when you require the recovery. Would you say that's true for you in your experience?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I must say, I always say this because I was never a really sort of high protein guy, and I'm not particularly high protein now. But you know, I get 100, 150 grams of protein depending on any given day, and because I always used to get about 60. You know, I was very sort of Ellington Darden diet type balance. You don't need a lot of protein. I was doing that for years. But over the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe I really upped my protein, and that's a huge impact on my recovery.
Has that also contributed a lot to your improvements in muscle mass as well?
Yeah, I believe it has. Yeah. I like to use that. I use that analogy with protein, that it's very much like a lottery ticket. Have I said that before?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's protein. I think is if you keep your protein intake consistently high, and I'm not talking 300 grams a day. I'm just talking, you know, maybe a gram per pound of body weight. If you keep it up that height most of the time, you're probably not going to use it. You're probably going to urinate it out, excrete it out, you know. That's probably going to happen most of the time, because muscles grow when they feel like it. They don't grow when you tell them. You know, they don't grow linearly. They grow in spurts. But so protein is very much like a lottery ticket. If you haven't got a ticket when the lottery's called, and you haven't got that winning ticket, you aren't going to win it. And the protein is very much like that. You need it there when you need that substrate there when the biological organism requires it. You may waste a lot of it, and I think that's probably where that came in. You're just going to that advice: don't have protein because you're going to waste most of it. But I think if it is elevated slightly, your protein intake, it does help with recovery. And when your body is ready to just take that little jerk upwards, that substrate needs to be in there at that time. You know, It's like having nitrous in the car. You don't use it until you press the button. You know, that's kind of, I don't know, these analogies, I don't know. But you get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. Do you ever cycle off it? Do you literally do that every single day? Or are there days where you might have only like 40 grams of protein?
I think life throws those sort of cycles at you, you know?
Yeah.
Going on holiday or the weekend, I just back off. Because I'm not so concentrated on the eating for those times. Unless I'm training specifically for something. You know, if I go to Spain on holiday, then instead of having a big tuna salad for lunch, I'll have a burger and 3 beers, you know. So that's the cycle. This natural life takes care of that. You know, it's just normal. I don't have to. I'm not in my hotel on holiday with mixing protein powder, man. You know, I'm having a cup of coffee and a croissant.
Yeah, same.
A cigar on the balcony.
Cigar chomping Ted Harrison. I'm interested in talking about diet actually a bit more in a sec. But before we jump to that, I just was curious in terms of your hypertrophy approach with clients, where you do the HIIT session and then the secondary sort of hypertrophy session. And I know that's the broad template which you mold to the client. Have you ever found people that don't improve with that approach, that actually might improve in terms of muscle mass, I mean, with less volume or a different way? Or does that seem to work for everyone?
You know, I mean, elderly people seem to respond very well. You know, people in their 60s, 70s, approaching 80, they need less volume. You know, I'll have them do, 4 or 5 exercises, 1 set each, as close to momentary muscular failure as possible, and that's all they need. And because I get them on a good diet, try to get them eating better, that you'll see the fat levels come down and the muscles will be more visible. But in terms of increasing muscular size, I have to say that single set approach, and I know how to do that, right? People listen to this and say, well, you're not doing it right. I've had a long time of knowing how to do that. I can do it myself and I can instruct people to do it. It doesn't work as well. I'm going to just speak my mind because this is what I do, right? It does not work as well as a little bit more volume. No, not for it. If you want to get muscles, if you want to stick an inch on your thighs, or you want to broaden your chest and your shoulders, and you want to put an inch on your arms, it's a worthy goal. Whether it's possible genetically, or you're going to have a lot more success, a lot more chance of doing it if you modulate the volume slightly, in my opinion.
No, I appreciate that, and I really enjoyed. Well, I say enjoyed. It was really horrible. The workout you put me through. I think I enjoyed the burger and the beers after the workout more.
Yeah, man.
But yeah. I mean, whilst I'm sceptical, if I lived in Colchester or Manningtree or near you, I would take you up on your services in a heartbeat, and I would love to experiment with that type of training over a longer period of time. It's a shame that I don't live near you, isn't it, really? But
yes, yeah. But it's very important. It's very important that people understand that I'm not talking about training 6 days a week. I'm not talking about 20 sets per muscle part. I'm not talking about Arnold double split. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a 20-minute workout and cramming as many sets as you can in that time, rationally done. 6 sets for arms with a 10-second break between sets, 4 sets of dips, 4 sets of 8 dips with 15 seconds rest,
Yeah, so no, I get what you're saying. So the volume is still incredibly low compared to traditional like bodybuilder type workouts. You're still in it. You're still working out like sub 1 hour per week. Would that be fair to say?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah. Which is it's important to highlight that for people, that this is still very low volume relative to those other training methods. Okay, cool. So you've talked about that protocol, how you've been training currently. What are your thoughts on? So I'm using a more of a body weight approach at the moment with Drew Bay's Project Kratos, and I'd be curious. Do you think? What are your thoughts on body weight when it comes to building more muscle? Do you think there's any downside? Do you feel like machines are more effective? What's your view on all that?
No, I like body weight training. I think it's great. Chins are fantastic. Push-ups done well, great. Wall sits, body weight squats, abdominal work. It works very well. I'm not against it, and what I love about it is how you can travel with it. Your body is. I know people say this. Your body is your gym, right? So anywhere you go, you can do it well, and you can do it slow to make it harder. People have been working out and looking great doing body weight training for eons, right? So I've got nothing against it. I think it's great. I mean, what's a dip? That's a body weight exercise. Yeah. Chin, you can't diss them, and they're great.
I'm always trying to. I found it very challenging to do the bodyweight stuff, not only from trying to reach failure, which takes a lot of discipline. Certainly for me, I've experienced versus perhaps doing it on machines. That's probably because I built up quite a good level of skill with using machines. But I found it, I've had to really kind of improve my form workout to workout on certain exercises, like things like push-ups and chins I'm really good at and I've done for a very long time, but things like heel raises, trying to actually modify that so that I can actually reach muscular failure, which I have disproportionately very strong large calves to the rest of me, so oh dear. Yeah, so I well, trust me, I'd sooner have a larger chest than calves, but that's the thing, isn't it? The things you're endowed with genetically, you just take for granted, don't you?
Yeah, millionaires want inner peace.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's interesting. Drew Bay actually gave me some advice on making the heel raise more intense by squeezing at the top, so max contraction, like really squeezing. So I'm going to experiment with that. But I have a question for you, and this is a really long roundabout way of trying to ask a simple question. Is when you do a crunch, right? So when you're just doing a standard crunch where you're curling your shoulders up to your knees, it's quite challenging because if you're trying to breathe naturally throughout the movement, it's quite hard to also contract your core at the same time. And I think, and Drew recommends like kind of the forced hyperventilation technique, which I do on a lot of exercises, certainly towards the end, as I know you do. But how do you, when you're doing a crunch, it sounds like a stupid question, but should you be contracting your abdominals the entire time? So all the while, I feel silly asking this because I think the answer is probably yes. But is that the case? You should be literally contracting your entire core throughout the whole movement, as opposed to just when you're coming up.
Well, there's two answers to this, right?
Yeah.
Two ways of looking at it. When we do that, when in my gym with clients, we put our legs as close to vertical as possible, with the knees bent and feet under a pad to prevent them going forward. I move the hips as close as I can because I think that kind of takes out a little bit the hip flexor action, which is very important. And then we cross our arms over our chest like this with our hands on the opposite shoulder, and then we roll rather than sit, roll up until the elbows make contact with the mid-thigh, and pause and do this thing that you just said. It's great. You pant. Okay, and then you come down. When you reach the floor, we lift the chest, which relaxes the abdominals, okay, and stretches them. And then we quickly return and roll up. We do it very smooth and under control. I think a better exercise, that's a very good exercise. It's very challenging if done right. But a better one is what I like to say is the modified plank. And you see people doing it now out there, and it's very good. You get on your knees and your elbows are in a normal plank position. And this is like a crunch in reverse, okay? So you're kneeling, it's like a plank, but you're kneeling, okay, with your elbows under your shoulders, and you're relaxed with your head in a neutral position. And then you take your belly button and draw it in towards your spine, and you hump your back like a cat, kind of like this. And then you hold it and pant 10 to 20 times with a strong abdominal contraction. And then you release and go into what they call an upward dog. Have you seen that in yoga?
Uh-huh.
To stretch, and then you flow back into that plank again and do that, and do 3 to 4 cycles of that. That works. That holding, that pulling your belly button back, breathing and contracting your abdominals is brutal.
Interesting.
It's great.
It sounds like the cat vomit that Tim Ferriss talks about in 4 Hour Body. Are you familiar with that
no.
description? Yeah, it's where you suck into your belly button to your spine. I was always concerned because I think I read or heard somewhere that when you do that, when you suck in real hard, you're moving organs upward and you're moving organs around your body, and that there's perhaps from some risk associated with that in some way. Do you have any thoughts on that, or do you just think that's bogus?
I think that's bogus, because you can do a thing called a stomach vacuum, where you expel all the air from your lungs and then suck the belly in. And that was a huge thing in bodybuilding. Frank Zane particularly used to do that for physique display. And also it's been done in yoga for many, many years. I don't think that bringing your stomach muscles in, contracting them in that way, I think it's a little bit of misleading maybe to say pull the belly button in. What I'm trying to say is crunch the abdominals, contract the abdominals forcefully, and then your abdominal wall makes a solid line, maybe a slight curvature there, a solid line that just holds that place. There's no pressure on the stomach, There's pressure on the abdominals, but nothing is being manipulated inside that cavity, I don't believe. No.
Okay. How much value do you think? So, what I've always noticed is that chin-ups work the abdominals really, really well. If I haven't done chin-ups for a long time, I find that my soreness is actually more in my abdominals than it is anywhere else. So do you think that so long as you're doing a set of chins every week, that actually additional abdominal work is very little value? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you've just answered your own question there about your abdominal training, because what happens when you chin is as you come down, your abdominals are lengthening, and as you pull up, you're using your abdominals to pull you up to the bar past the halfway point.
Right.
So that you don't have to keep them contracted, and you'll get sore in the abdominals because it's a very natural way for them to work from this movement. You're stretching them here, which is what I was referring to on the crunch as you lift the chest. You're stretching them there, contracting them in this position. That's why they get sore, because they're then working through that limited range, which they're designed to do. And what was the other question? I've rabbited on. I forgot that now. What?
No, whether they were. No, that's great. It's great how we kind of come full circle there. But you were going to say, I think my other part of my question was: is there any value in adding abdominal exercises in addition to doing chin-ups? Yeah.
You're always going to get better results from a muscle group if you exercise it directly, And if you are losing weight, if you want your abdominals to show through, then you want to build them up. It makes it easier.
Cool. Another question from I think one of the lads on Facebook was. And it would sound like you, and I think you've mentioned this to me before, but is it fair to say that you've had some people plagiarize some of your training methods but don't actually refer back to you? Is that true, and does that bother you?
Certain people have done that a little bit. I do think it's very important to cite your thing. I mean, a lot of what I do, I'm very open about where I get it from, Vince and, Mike Menser and Arthur Jones, and you pull these from everywhere. But there have been instances where directly I've said things and you'll see someone else doing it and not citing. But that's just human nature, right? Big deal.
I was going to ask you how others can, I guess, cope and react to that in a constructive way, but I guess you've kind of said it there. It's like, look, people are always going to take what you're saying, but I suppose one way of looking at it is ultimately it's the message is getting out there and helping more people. So, personally, I don't think it's going to harm your business at all, in my opinion. Yeah,
you've got to keep your ego in check with this stuff.
Yeah. Cool. So I just wanted to move on to diet and ask you some questions on that. How have your views on diet changed since we last spoke, and what's your diet look like now?
Pretty much the same, really. I always watch I think you can get bogged down in diet in terms of dogma. I'm a paleo guy, I'm a low carb guy, I'm a high protein, I'm a balanced dark guy. I'm clean, I'm a vegetarian. I think in terms of training, I think your diet can be a bit like your training from my approach. It can be varied. I put a picture of my lunch on. God, how sad! I put a picture of my lunch on Facebook the other day. Oh, you're eating, my mate Pete. He says, you're eating no carbs. You're just such a low carb guy. Don't eat low carbs. You should eat your carbs. And I said, there's beans in there, man. There's vegetables and beans. But the only reason I do that is because if I eat carbohydrates at lunchtime, I want to fall asleep. In the afternoon, I get groggy and a headache. So I don't eat carbohydrates at lunch. I find that my energy level is much more balanced if I keep my carbs under control, and I look a little bit better, I think there's probably a tremendous validity to the argument that in terms of weight loss, the low carbohydrate diet and various other diets that de-emphasize carbohydrates probably all boils down to calories, right? Okay?
Yeah.
There's probably also something in that insulin response to fat storage. There's got to be something in that. But I think if you're limiting your carbohydrates, you're limiting your calories at the same time. So that's probably why it contributes to your fat loss. But it's other things too, Lawrence. It's your energy levels. When you keep your carbohydrates at a not too high a level, everyone's different in this, right? This is why some people are diabetic and other people aren't. Some people can gain fat looking at food and other people's can't. Everything's individual, right?
Yeah.
So you look at your diet individually and don't eat a sandwich at lunchtime if it's making you want to fall asleep at 3 o'clock, I'm not anti-bread. I just think it's good to knock bread out because it's pretty worthless food, in terms of what you could select. So I'm not high carb, low carb, I'm nothing. I eat according to my energy levels and the results I want to see in my body.
So what does that look like for you at the moment? I mean, I know you said it hasn't changed much, but it'd be good for those that haven't listened to that, what does an average day in the life of Ted Harrison look like from a diet perspective?
Breakfast is always the same thing most of the time. It's half a tub of plain Greek yogurt, full-fat Greek yogurt, with a scoop of protein powder, and some whatever fruits are around at the time, like a nectarine, maybe some melon and some blueberries, a little sprinkle of cinnamon and some honey. That's breakfast. Lunch is some form of vegetable. It can be mashed up vegetables, like a microwave packet of vegetables, mashed up with a little butter and lemon and then a tin of tuna. Or I like albacore tuna in a jar. That's like very high-end, very, very good quality tuna. Or a chicken breast, something like that. That's lunch. And then dinner is generally what the hell we're having, because I'm feeding a family half the time and I've got to look after my kids too. So, if I sit them down to a grilled tuna steak with a slice of lime, they're going to chase me out of the house. So we have whatever's available. I try and keep it healthy. We'll have chicken. Sometimes we'll have pasta. Sometimes we'll have what do we have? There's fish. So whatever's going, but I try and keep it nice. There's always vegetables there. There's some rice there. There's a good quality protein source. And then in the evening, I'll have a couple of squares of dark chocolate. I went for a stage just recently of eating cake every night, and boy, you could really tell that on my waistline. So now I'm back to dark chocolate. I love that dark chocolate that's got the sea salt in it. I'll have a couple of squares of that.
What brand is that? Do you remember?
I think it's Lindt.
Oh, yeah.
It's good stuff. Yeah, a couple of squares of that. Great.
Why in the evening?
Because I think, when you finish your evening meal and then you slump down in front of the television, it's nice, right? You have, so we've had an hour now since our dinner. Now get the kettle on. I want a nice ginger tea. I drink a lot of ginger tea, and a couple of squares of dark chocolate. It's great. It's just a nice wind up for the evening.
Yeah, I do something similar. I usually come in and I can't. I'm too impatient to wait for my dinner to cook that I'll eat chocolate whilst I'm cooking.
You haven't got an ounce of fat on you, man. You're fine, right?
No, yeah, I'm doing well, a little bit more at the moment, I would say. But no, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's. I go for the green and blacks, organic, 85% cocoa, dark chocolate. So it's fine, in moderation. It's all good.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because I was quite. Very last time we spoke, and shortly after that, I became a bit dogmatic, if I'm honest, about high fat, low carb, and I found it worked really well for me. It doesn't mean it works well for everyone else, obviously. And I thought, everyone can perform really well on low carb. But before I interviewed Gary Torbs, I had a lot of people send me literature to say, look, this study shows that actually the whole insulin hypothesis isn't true in terms of high carbohydrate causing insulin to elevate more than any other macronutrient, and I'll be honest, I still haven't reviewed all of those because frankly I haven't made the time to do so, but it was really interesting and it caused me to challenge my beliefs, and that's a healthy thing. To kind of review where I'm at with regard to that stuff, but yeah, it's just interesting how I just didn't even question it. I thought, of course low carbohydrate diets are healthier and make you leaner and all of that, but it's so important to keep an open mind with these things.
You asked me last time we were talking, you asked me about bulletproof coffee, and
that's
different
right,
things. Yeah. And I kind of, in the muddle of the conversation, I sort of said, well, there's when you've been in the game for a very long time, you see a lot of stuff come and go.
Yes.
A lot of ideas come and go.
Yeah,
that's what you've just experienced.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think Dave Asprey from the Bulletproof side has got some good information. I do, but he is at the end of the day selling products, and he has a bias. So I've actually been looking at. I don't know, have you heard of Matt Lalonde? He's a Harvard biochemist.
No, I haven't.
Fascinating bloke, very, very intelligent, and does studies on nutrition on the side for fun. And he did a talk at PaleoFX some years ago, and he's got this wonderful presentation on nutritional density, where he ranked foods based on their nutritional density, and he wasn't discriminating on macronutrients at all, and he actually eats a relatively high carbohydrate diet. He has tubers in almost every meal, and I found his approach very refreshing and very scientific. The rigor of the way he looks at this stuff. I think that some people perhaps they might say they have a rigorous scientific method, but at the end of the day, if they've got skin in the game, they're pushing a product. You can't trust what they're saying. You have to delve into the literature, I think. And a lot of people don't have time to do that, I think. Yeah. So where am I going with this? I'm not going anywhere in particular. but I just wanted to share it with you.
It's interesting, Lawrence. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's this journey, right? The exercise and nutritional journey. Yeah. And eventually you come to that point. And I'm still learning, and you're learning, you're going through this, and eventually you start to separate the wheat from the chaff, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. Just wanted to also ask you, in terms of, I guess, eating for muscle gain, when we last spoke, you advocate that someone try and consume a surplus of 300 to 500 calories per day. And obviously you mentioned the importance of protein intake. Is that still the kind of protocol that you would recommend to a young man or woman looking to maximize muscle gain?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And protein every 3 hours, is that still the philosophy that you try to, well, you sort of mentioned that earlier, but
keep protein in the system all the time. During the when you're waking hours, make sure you're getting roughly, I would say, as a prescription, a gram of protein per pound of body weight, if you're interested in gaining muscular size, in my experience.
Okay. So as I was talking to you about before we started recording, I've got a large number of social events this month, and I'm not very good at not consuming alcohol when in those situations. And what I don't want to do is totally derail my health in the next 30 days. So I wanted to ask you, what tips do you have for abstaining, if any, from alcohol? I mean, it's not like I sound like I'm a blooming alcoholic, don't I? But that's not the case. I can go out and I can not drink, and I've done that plenty of times. But there are certain situations with certain people where I find that challenging, and I wondered whether you had any thoughts on that.
If you want a clean drink, you need a good quality vodka with fresh lime and soda and plenty of ice. Okay. That'll do the job. And in a big glass, a shot of vodka, so you're getting some alcohol in you, but it's a good quality alcohol, and you've got a lot of liquid in there, a lot of water, and a bit of flavouring with a fresh lime rather than that lime cordial, although that's okay in a pinch. In terms of not drinking, it's no big deal, is it? But I completely agree on the social necessity sometimes of having a drink around in certain, because it's social anxiety, isn't it?
That's it.
So yeah. So don't reach the tipping point. There's a tipping point when you consume alcohol. You'll have 2 drinks or 3 drinks, and then you reach a point where you just don't give a shit, right? And I'll have another one, and the next thing you know, you're pissed up, right? So you want to avoid the tipping point, and the way to do that is to go back to that age-old thing of drinking slowly and not drinking consecutive alcoholic drinks. Have beer and then soda, and then another beer and then soda, and break it up that way. Yeah,
that's good advice.
Yeah, that's what I do, but I'm not tremendously successful at it all the time. I like a drink. I'm very miserable at the moment because I'm coming up to we're going away on holiday in May, and I'm trying to cut out alcohol from my diet for body fat purposes.
Yeah.
So I'm not permitting myself any drink whatsoever other than 3 beers today because it's Saturday.
So when will you have your first beer? Are you already having it? 11:30 in the morning.
I've had them. No, I haven't really. No, I'm waiting for my other half to return from seeing her mother, and then we're going to pop down the shop and get 3 bottles of like an American IPA or something, and I'll have those later. I'm looking forward to that.
What's your go-to brand or beer at the moment?
I like Sierra Nevada, and I like Brooklyn Lager. Yeah, those 2. I've gone off lager, normal lager.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I work with someone who's really into their beer and introduced me to lots of ales, and kind of, because I was always scared of, I don't want to try that because ale's gross and all this, but then actually after trying different brands I found ones I really liked, and since then all I do drink when I go out for a drink is either something like Guinness or a really nice ale, and then when I have to drink like a Foster's or a San Miguel, it's gross. I'm like,
I agree.
I never used to be like that, but now it's you really taste the difference, don't you?
It's huge. Yeah.
Have you tried the Brew Dogs? Have you tried those?
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah. Brew Dog, Punk IPA and all that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love it.
You can.
Don't talk about this, man. You're driving me crazy.
You can go to the Brewdog.
I'm leaning in, listeners. I'm leaning in now.
He is. I can see right in your mouth. It's lovely. You can actually go to like one of the Brewdog head offices or something like that, and they can. I don't know if it's a head office or some other business that's sponsored by Brewdog, but you can actually you can have a bath in their beer apparently. My girlfriend sent me a link to this recently, which I decided was not a good idea that I do that right now, but perhaps one for the future. I can't believe we've just spoken about beer for about 10 minutes on my podcast, which is supposed to be about health, but never mind. But you've got to have every now and again relax and perhaps have a vice or two, eh?
I think sometimes, like anything in life, you can draw a comparison to how you tolerate alcohol. Your body tolerates alcohol as you get older than as it does when you're younger, and that is also giving you clues to your general recovery ability. Because when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could drink a lot more alcohol than I can now. If I go out and drink. Now it's 3 or 4 beers, maybe share a bottle of wine. I cannot drink anything like I used to, and that's my metabolism, right? As I get older, things are changing.
Yeah.
I'm not coping with it as well, and that's the same as training.
That is interesting. I always like hearing about your because obviously you've been training for so long. It's really interesting understanding what you've learned through that journey, and I'm just trying to absorb it all like a sponge. You mentioned before we start. Well, actually, when I pinged you on Facebook, you mentioned meditation as a talking point. What is it that you're doing there at the moment, and how has that evolved since you were doing it last time we spoke?
Well, I've been meditating on and off for about 15 years, and unfortunately, it's more off than on. But just the way my life is structured at the moment has allowed me in the last year to have more time doing it, and I've been involved in it very much. There's a lot of dogma and a lot of misinformation about meditation out there, but it's a very basic activity that you can perform once or twice a day, and I love the feeling of that it gives me between sessions. I'm not necessarily trying to be one with the universe. That's a great idea, but I'm not meditating precisely for that reason. I'm meditating because it's very relaxing, de-stressing activity, and it flows over into your day. There's numerous studies done on transcendental meditation. It's all online. You can read it. It's non-dogmatic. It's not connected to religion. I happen to be a little bit religious, but it's not. I'm spiritual, for want of a better word, but I don't do it for particularly that reason. It's just relaxing, and it's I find it helps to deal with life.
Yeah.
You talk about social anxiety going out. If you spend 20 minutes in meditation, you don't really have that problem.
Interesting. So, like, what do you, when you do, appreciate that it's like on and off, but when you do it, what does it look like? How do you, in like practical terms, how do you meditate? How do you sit? How long for, etc.?
Well, I used to have a thing called a Caesar bench, which was just a very low bench that you tuck your legs under, your feet and your legs underneath you. But I have a very bad ankle injury from years ago, and it was getting very painful. So I relented, and I just sit in a seat with a cushion under my spine, so I get some forward pelvic tilt there. And I just sit with my hands relaxed in my lap, and I either do like the Zen breath counting, which is basically counting from 1 to 10. I first learnt that actually from reading Frank Zane doing that years and years ago when I was 17. And you count from 1 to 10 silently. You're counting your breaths. The out breath 1, the out breath 2, and you concentrate on that. The mind wanders. You come back to the breath again. But recently I've been doing a form of transcendental meditation, which is mantra, which is it's saying a phrase quietly to yourself over and over and concentrating on that phrase. And as your mind wanders off of it, you come back to that phrase. It's more about the tonality internally rather than the actual words itself. It's the tonality, something to concentrate on. It's very easy. You mustn't force it. Your mind wanders, you come back to it. And I do that once or twice a day for about 20 minutes. I do my first one very early in the morning if anyone gets up.
Cool. I also think
a good book. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
A good book. I wrote it down in case you asked me, because I know we talked about it. A good book about it is called Deep Meditation by a gentleman called Yogani, which is Yogani. Deep Meditation. It's a great book. Really simplifies it.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes. And for everyone listening, I do also think Headspace is a really good kind of introduction to all of this, because it gives you, it's a guided meditation, and it shows you how to do it, and gives you kind of a 10-day process. So it's a good way to get started, at least to try this stuff out if you don't know what the hell you're doing. And also the book that Ted mentioned will be in the show notes. What have you changed your mind about in health and fitness since we last spoke, Ted? In addition to anything we've already mentioned, if anything at all. I mean, I appreciate if there's not been much change at all.
What have I changed my mind about? I think maybe I would have to say frequency. Since we spoke, training 3 times or even 4 times a week, but modulating the volume within those sessions, making more micro workouts was forced on me by necessity for being busier and busier in the gym. So I can train for 10 minutes or, and then the next workout will be 20, maybe the next one will be 10, and the next one will be 30. So I think you can do more in terms of frequency, providing you can balance the volume correctly. If someone would have said to me, you can train 4 days a week, I thought you're nuts, but you're not going to recover. But you can, providing those workouts are not repetitive in volume and intensity. You can modulate. Sometimes I'll work out just on the punching device. You're right. I could do that 4 or 5 days a week.
What is this punching device?
It's a unit sold by the mixed martial artist Baz Rutten. Okay. It's called the Body Action System, and we have it in our gym. And it's just a device it's like a square pad that represents the stomach and chest region, and then a head-sized pad that represents the head, and it's on a stand, and the head is and the body pad are articulate on a very tough spring, and you can hit the hell out of it for rounds, to 2 or 3 minute rounds, and it's a great exercise.
Cool. What's the best book you've read lately on health and fitness, or the book that you most recommend to people in general in that topic?
In health and fitness?
Yeah.
The best book I've read on health and fitness recently is the Frank Zane Diaries. I believe it's available in Kindle now, but I've got the original paperback version. I'll pick it up and read it, and it goes out there, man. It's crazy, but I like it because it resonates with me because of he's very eclectic and Zen-like in his approach. He exercises far more than I recommend, but I love that book because there's some great nutritional advice. It's a fantastic insight into his own mind and how he trained for his Mr. Olympias and various competitions. I wouldn't say, if a client walked through the door, I would not give him Frank Zane's training diaries to read. But for me personally, I love that book. I always love The Steel Tip by Dr. Ken. You've got to keep pursuing him, man. You've got to get him on this podcast.
Yes, I've tried. I will continue to do so. If you're listening, Ken Leisner, please reach out.
Yeah, we want you, man. Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Any more on
that? So I love The Steel Tip is fantastic, and I that's really health and fitness wise. That's what I've been reading.
Cool. So these are obviously my sort of bonus questions, rapid fire, if you will. The answers don't have to be rapid fire. What's the best investment of time, energy, or money you have ever made?
Exercise, or just generally in life?
Just generally in life.
Buying a house, getting a mortgage, be lucky enough to get a mortgage, and investing in property, having a house. Yeah.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Well, because it's bricks and mortar, and generally, unless we get involved in some kind of horrendous crash or civil war, generally it's pretty safe investment. It appreciates very slowly and gradually, but generally over a 10-year period, you're going to earn money on your house. I know the standard of living goes up by 3% or whatever it is, but generally it's a pretty safe thing. You've got somewhere to live. It doesn't need to be flash or fancy. You've got a nice roof over your head. If you're lucky enough to get a mortgage these days, it was a lot easier years ago. It's harder now, I know. But if you can get a house or a flat or something that you can be on a mortgage and paying it off, it's a great, solid investment. It's always there, Yeah,
that's a good answer. Obviously, that's a investment of money that you feel has been a really good decision and will provide a great return in lots of different ways. Is there anything you can think where, you're really glad you invested time doing X that has provided you with a big return now, not just financially or, could be spiritually, health benefits? Is there anything that comes to mind from that perspective? I like to spend time when I can with my family. I love to take them out all together. It doesn't always happen. I'm not the best at doing it, but we generally try to sit down and have dinner, a couple of times a week all together. I like to sit down watching TV with them. But people do their own thing. Some people are doing in the family do their thing, but I like my family, like my son, my daughter, and my beautiful partner. I like us to all be together. I think that's a great investment in time, because you can sit, meditate, which is a great investment in time. You can do all these things, but the practical day-to-day reality of spending time with people you love is a wonderful thing. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That is something that is really underappreciated, I think, today, in that we live far more distributed in terms of the family unit being distributed all over the place. It's unfortunate, because if you look at a lot of the blue zones, where the highest density, I'm sure you're aware of this, Ted, the highest density of centenarians, they have a sort of common theme across all of them, is the time they spend building those social connections with very close friends and family.
Yes.
And I suppose if you're in an unfortunate position where you don't have access to family, be it physical or virtual, ideally physical is obviously far more beneficial, then building a close group of close friends and prioritising that and making sure you're spending time with those people is as good as any way to cultivate that. Yeah. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah.
What change in your life or behavioural modification are you most proud of in the last year or in recent memory, and which habits are you trying to change now?
Jeff Thompson, the author, talks about killing your addictions, and I love that phrase, and I have been through periods of not drinking alcohol for 6 months, and sitting down to meditate regularly, and stuff that your body doesn't really, and your mind doesn't really want to do. And I love the fact that when you do those, when you break those habits and you resist those habits, you form. There's a very, I'm not sure if this is to explain it correctly, but it's like a friction in your body. And when you give up an addiction, or you give up something that you're doing too regularly, the little monster inside of you that's controlling that is slowly dying, and there's an energy created in your resistance that can flow over into your life and give you so much more energy. And gradually, as the days go by, the little monster shrinks and shrinks, and you release much more energy. So I think it's a very good question, because I think it's a very valuable practice to give up certain things which aren't contributing to your mental and physical well-being. And I think that not drinking any alcohol for 6 months, because I was very pleased I could do that without too much stress, and having the discipline to meditate for treating that seriously enough to sit down regularly 20 minutes once or twice a day has been a tremendous. I'm very proud of that.
Oh, well done. That is both those things are really impressive. Is there anything you're working on currently? You mentioned obviously you've got a pretty strict diet prior to a holiday in May. But is there anything else in addition to that you're working on trying to change for you?
Trying to spend a bit more time with the family unit, doing more together. Recently took everyone out for Sunday lunch maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and trying to cultivate that more. When I was growing up, my dad used to do that a lot. He'd get everyone together and we'd take us out, all go together. And you have to realise when you get to my age that then it becomes your responsibility. No one's going to do that for you. You've got to take the reins, book the restaurant, summon everyone together, and try and get that going together.
Have you managed to get your son in the gym? I know he was last time we were in Colchester. He was keen, but wasn't hitting the gym regularly enough. Has he got back into the rhythm of that? Or?
He's not training as much as he should be. No, he hasn't been to the gym for a while. But when he does, he goes mental at it.
Yeah,
he's going to come back. I know he'll come back, but he's doing other things at the minute.
Man, if I lived near you, or if I was your son, it's a weird thing to say, I would be in your gym. Well, actually, that being said, maybe that's the thing, right? Because you're his father, maybe he doesn't want to work out of you all the time. That sounds really bad, but you know what I mean? It's like, I don't hang out with my dad and train with him, I want to train with my friends or whatever,
Yeah. He's a real quick responder too.
Yeah, so.
He had one workout, then all the diet gets cleaned up, and he's training 3-4 times a week, and he's down the gym, and he does really well.
Good stuff. Good, that's good. I hope he get back into it because. If I had you at my doorstep, I'd be using that. Yeah. I do. I mean, just for me, from my perspective, I really miss. And well, to be honest, even when I trained on machines, I didn't have supervision really. Sometimes I would. Adam Budnick,
yes,
who's been on the podcast, and he's a personal trainer. He's a wonderful trainer, and occasionally he trained me at Keyser, but not that frequently. And now I don't have any supervision at the moment, and I really crave that. Somehow I might have to see if I can arrange that in the future, I think. Yeah,
well, you're always welcome down, that anytime you want.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to arrange something soon, so I'll drop you an email and we'll perhaps arrange something maybe back end of this year or something like that. Yeah, cool.
Sure.
What sort of final couple questions for you, Ted? So I appreciate time's ticking on. What part and advice do you have for anyone looking to optimize their physique in terms of building the maximum amount of muscle naturally, but also retaining leanness? So what would your most important advice be to that person looking to achieve those sorts of outcomes?
So you're talking about someone adding muscular tissue to their body, but not fat along with it.
Exactly. They want to do that. They want to optimize their body composition, basically.
Eat according to your energy levels. In terms of, you get a good idea of what works and what doesn't in terms of your diet by how you respond in your energy levels. If your energy levels are staying high, generally your diet's pretty good. Eat, I hate this expression, but eat clean, right? So eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, eat lean protein sources, and eat some full fat yogurt, use olive oil, and make sure you're getting a gram of protein for every pound of body weight, okay? That's the basic, and then look into the approach of a lot of volume, done very briefly, volume and brevity together. Do that. Make sure you're working the large muscles of your body. Make sure you're not neglecting working your legs and hips, your back, and cover the big compound movements. But try the approach where you're working out with more sets than normal, but keeping the rest time down. 6 sets of 6 is a great place to start, and start with 30 seconds rest and reduce that down to about 15 seconds between sets, and cram a lot of work into a very short space of time, and train 3 days a week.
Cool. Yeah, I will link to the previous podcast we did and that blog post I wrote following my experience with you and training with you, because I think in that blog post I describe as well as I can the type of protocol that you're talking about there, and my experience doing it, and it was a lot of fun. And no, I'd like to do it again sometime. I had a really good pump after that. I remember trying to flex my muscles in the restaurant afterwards, and you were just feeding my ego. You were just like, Lawrence, you look massive. which was a lot of fun. So what's the best way for people to find out more about you, Ted, at the moment, and contact you?
Really, if they're on Facebook, just give me a private message. And then I do some Skype consultations. I'll talk to people on the phone. I'm not. You can send a message via my website, but just reach out. I'm not Doug McGuff. I'm not hard to get hold of. As I'm not famous. Just ring me. Just ring me. Come down and see me. Get some time. Come down and see. I'll show you how to do it in an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, and I recommend anyone listening, certainly if you're UK based and it's easier for you. I mean, obviously if you're from the US, I still think it'd be worth your time to go and see Ted and train with him and learn from him, because I've learned a tremendous amount, and I'm only sad that I can't see you more often. To be honest. So for everyone listening, for the show notes for this episode and all of the episodes on this podcast, please go to 15minutescorporatewarrior.com/podcast. That's 1515, and you will see all of the show notes and links that Ted and I mentioned during this episode. But cool. All right. So Ted, thanks again. This has been really fun, and I'm sure we'll do one again in the future. But I'll let you get on with your day, and I'll talk to you soon, mate.
Okay, mate. Always a pleasure. You take care of yourself, yeah?
You too, Ted. All the best. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Before you head off, for a free ebook with 6 interview transcriptions with world-class performers on how to optimize productivity and health and fitness, and weekly updates from me on the latest podcasts and blog updates, head on over to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/ebook. That's 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/ebook, and enter your email address for instant access.